ready? Gentlemen, you ready? Good evening. I call this special called meeting on Monday, June 14th, 2021 to order. At this time, I will ask for Councilman Inslee Feimster to lead us in the invocation and the pledge.
Will you bow with me? Dear Heavenly Father, we are thankful for this day. We're thankful for the rain that we just had. We're thankful for our freedoms that we have in this country. We pray for our president as he is in Europe. We pray for our military. Pray that we'll not have any wars anytime soon. We pray for our state officials and our law enforcement. We pray especially for the law enforcement that we will have a much calmer public than we've had recently. We pray that the decisions that we make tonight will be for your glory. I pray all this in Jesus' name. Amen.
Amen.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
The first item on our agenda tonight is third reading of ordinance number 599 to provide for the levy of taxes in Pickens County for ordinary county purposes for the fiscal year beginning July 1, 2021 and ending June 30, 2022, and direct expenditure thereof. Do I have a motion and a second to this constitute third reading of ordinance number 599?
So moved.
I have a motion. Do I have a second? Second by Councilman Whitehurst. All right, gentlemen, discussion on ordinance 599.
Well, I mean, just some house cleaning. From what I understand, is we have to actually make a motion to roll those rec funds forward. Does that sound right, Mr. Chairman?
Yes, sir. And if that's your motion, I'll second your motion. If you want to make
So
that motion.
I guess my motion is to roll whatever remaining rec funds that are in the, I don't know what you call it, account is that? We're just recreation account that are not used this year to next year. That's my motion.
I will second your motion. Any discussion on that?
I think it's a good idea because sometimes we are able to collect funds for 2 or 3 years for a large project that's coming on later.
Any other discussion on that motion? Are all those in favor of that motion to roll rec funds forward? All those in favor, please signify by raising your hand. And that carries. Any other discussion?
I want to make a, let's see, I got a discussion on the motion. We passed the motion, the library local commit would be 3.4 million. There's going to be some savings, or hopefully some savings at some point. And at this point, it could be spent on anything. If we spend one dime of this money on other than roads, I think it would be a political bait and switch. So I'm going to make a motion to make sure that the time when we set the millage, the rate for the library is set equal to the local commitment of 3.4 million, and the excessive millage or funding will be spent on road paving and patching only.
So I have a motion that when we set the millage, that anything additional be set towards road paving and patching. I have a second by Councilman Wilson. Discussion on that.
I have some questions for Ralph that relate to this.
Okay.
All right, Ralph.
Mr. Administrator, you don't mind if we ask Mr. Greeno questions?
Perfectly fine, thank you.
Okay, what do you project the cash on hand to be for the library at the end of June?
Haven't gone through June, but as of May 31st, cash on hand was $3.6 million.
3.6 million, that's how much cash they had on hand.
Yes.
Do you want to project what it's going to be at the end of June?
I have a projection in your handout, but as far as cash, I can tell you what my estimate is. I handed this in your package. It's on the very last page. It's highlighted in yellow. So I went through on the revenues, tried to estimate what taxes are going to be because we knew what taxes outstanding were. So I estimated the taxes. On the expenditure side, you'll see about $3.6 million. What I did on that was went ahead and estimated payroll because we have 2.3 pay periods left. So I went ahead and pretty much projected what that's going to be. And then on the rest of the expenditures, operating, contractual, I just assumed, and we'll probably end up better than this, I assumed that they're going to spend all of their money, but generally that doesn't happen, but I just went on the assumption that they would. So if you take what the estimated revenues are, which is 3.9 million, and you subtract out the estimated expenditures, we're going to have an excess of about $288,000.
Okay, so this is why I use actual numbers. They have 3.6 million in the bank now. You anticipate 3.2 million, so they would have saved
288,000.
Yeah, about 300,000.
Right. It's probably going to be.
It's conservative.
I think that's conservative.
Okay, so it's probably 300,000 to 400,000. All right, what is the year-to-date spending through May 31st?
With that number, $3 million year to date.
Okay, so if you prorate that to 12 months, their spending on over the whole year will be about 3.3 million, which will be what it was last year. That was what I was basing. I mean, even under my proposal, 3.5 divided by 3.3, their spending next year would have been up 6%. Now their spending is going to be up 3.68 divided by 3.3 last year, right? That is 11.5%. The budget we have now, the year-over-year spending is going to be up 11.5%, right? So if it's 3.3 million this year, which is what I'm projecting, you think it's going to be higher than that, right?
The expenditures for 2021, I want to make sure we're.
Okay.
The expenditures for 2020, I'm estimating on a very conservative basis, $3.6 million.
So you think they're going to spend another 600,000 in 30 days?
I'm going on the basis of they spend everything in 30 days.
Even though they've been spending.
Here again, I don't want to assume.
Even though they've been spending 275,000 a month, you think they're going to spend 600,000 in June?
I don't know what they're going to do with their budget. So I think my point is they're going to do better than that. I'm just not going to go out there, not knowing what the library has planned for the last month of June.
Okay. All right. So
Now, I did put an email out today to all departments that they have to get all their requisitions in and their POs in by this Friday. So I do think they're.
You will see more in June.
I know,
You'll see it back.
but if they're spending 275 a month, it's highly unlikely they're going to spend 600.
They're going to turn out better. They're going to turn out better than that. And we have 2.3 more pay periods, which is most of their salary. I mean, most of their budget.
All right, that's my own.
Yeah, they're going to do better than the 288.
Say probably $300,000 to $400,000.
Right.
Spending next year will grow probably 10%. Okay. Well, I'll tell you this one. Okay, that's my only point.
Any other discussion there? Now, on the motion, and I want to be clear on the motion, I'm assuming, which is dangerous, that you're assuming, me assuming that you're assuming is really dangerous, that what you referred to was that the millage, when the millage is set, so you want to roll whatever remaining millage for the library over, but you're going to, so here's the problem. We set the budget, the millage is set based on the budget that we set.
No, my motion was to set the millage based on the local commitment of 3.4 million. So you're going to take 3.4 million, you're going to divide it by the value of the mill that they tell us in September. You're going to get a library millage.
Correct.
And that millage minus the 5.9 is going to be the amount that's diverted to roads.
And theoretically, we're just going off what we have right now, if I understand what you're saying, that's probably 0.4 of a mil.
Yeah.
Because it was what, 268 approximately?
Yeah.
So it's about 0.4 of a
We'll
mil.
see what the value of the mill is.
Right.
so for clarity purpose though, and I'm just being as clear as I know how to be, okay? For clarity purpose, we are going to set the library millage in our heads at 5.9 because that's where it's been traditionally or historically. No?
No. What we're gonna do is we're giving them a local commitment of 3.4 million. Whatever the value of a mill is in September, you'll divide that into it,
Correct.
right? So let's say, you don't know what it's gonna be.
Right now, it's 616.
Okay, so let's say you take 3.4 million and you divide it by 616. The value of a mill will be the number of mills will be 5.5.
And so on the.
So that's the 4/10 of a mill that will go to
So
roads.
on just do the simple, go dumb it down with me, Alex, because that's where I'm at, okay?
Okay.
Because millage is where it gets really confusing for a lot of people, including myself at times.
Right.
So on my tax bill, it'll say 5.5 mils for the library. If the value doesn't change and everything stays the same, it'll say 5.5 mils on the tax bill for the library.
Local operations will go up 4/10 of a mill. That will go to roads.
Yeah, we'll say 5.5.
So for clarity purpose, and I just want to be clear, for clarity purpose, we want to roll anything under 5.9 mils. That is your actual motion, is to roll anything under 5.9 mils to county operating.
Yes, but then that money has to be used for paving and patching. Okay, so but if the value of the mill is 800, then you're not gonna, the library mill is not gonna be 5.5.
It's going to be 4 mills, 4 point.
4 or 5.3, and then you'll subtract, so let's say it's 5.2, which is not gonna, 5.9 minus 5.2, that's 7/10 goes to county operations, and that goes devoted to paving. You're right.
So the motion is really anything under 5.9 mils rolls to county operating. Is that what you're saying?
For roads.
For, earmarked for roads.
Yes.
Yeah.
In
The
perpetuity.
value of a mill gets calculated by taking the 3.4 million divided by the value.
Because the library millage will be based on, my point for argumentative sake and clarity, my point is the library millage is gonna be based off of whatever gets us to 3.4 million. So you can't say anything over that because there is nothing over that.
You're right. You're right.
That's for argument's sake. I wanna be clear.
Mr. Chairman. So this means that in perpetuity, that means going forward year after year, that percentage of a mill will be assigned to roads?
No. Because you're gonna have a new budget every year for library.
Yeah, that's just this budget.
You don't do anything in perpetuity here, you're just doing it 1 year. I would like it to be perpetuity, but
Why not then?
because you can't budget for 10 years out in this meeting.
Well,
I can't tell you.
no,
what
you
the
have to
lib-
plan for the future.
I can't
so-
tell you what the library budget's gonna be.
No, I'm not saying the budget. I'm talking about if it's 4/10 of a mill, then 4/10 of a mill now is assigned to roads. Or if it's 6/10 of a mill, then 6/10 of a mill is now assigned to roads.
But
Going
you
forward.
can't do that because we have a minimum amount we have to pay from the state that has to go into that. And that's gonna change based on what that millage is gonna be, because we are required to fund a certain amount.
You're talking about the library, but what I'm saying is, so I'm taking that part off the table. If we're saying that we're really wanting to start putting money towards this, this is the opportunity this year to get it, then going forward, let's start assigning that percentage to the millage and then take that off of the road user fee.
That one of
So
the
4/10 of a mill off of $20 would be how much money savings for,
Take stuff off of the roads user fee. We're trying to build money up in there.
well, I'm trying to get rid of the road user fee and build it into a millage system so that we've got a plan for 20 years from now instead of for a year.
Right, but if what you're saying is take part of a budget from the library, which is gonna be only a couple $100,000, and take that out of road user fee, then we're just going backwards. There's less money available to pave roads.
Well, okay, then once we get equal to the road user fee, I want to eliminate the road user fee and put it all towards millage. It's a long-term process. So maybe if I take that part out of the discussion, but to Mr. Sada's point, why are we going to do something for just 1 year? That's not a sustainable plan. So why not go ahead and assign the 4/10 of a mill, whatever that comes, or whatever the percentage comes out to be.
One problem with that is, though, that you start doing something, as you say, in perpetuity, you're setting the limits on what future council people can do.
No, not any more than what we do with our budget anyway. I mean, you rolling 4/10 over this time, well, it's there, and you've earmarked it for roads, so you leave it earmarked for roads. That's no different than anything else we ever do.
My motion's just for 1 year. And basically, I think that's all you can basically do, because you don't know the budget for the library next year, you don't know the value of the mill, you don't know, all these things. Just for 1 year, that's all.
So my question then is your plan then next year to do it again?
So
So we're gonna do this every
so
year,
when
so
the-
that's why I'm saying, why not just go ahead and assign a millage of whatever that percentage is gonna be this year and start planning going forward? We've got a year to plan into the budget for next year.
It's a good point. The question I have is this something we could do? This would be a question to the attorney and the accountant and the administrator, of what are our rights at setting a millage on a future budget?
Well, I don't think you can find a future council on a future budget, but you can certainly set a millage this year.
So could we, so we're saying that we could set that millage to be, that's the rate for the library?
Yeah, but the next year you can just change it with a vote.
Yeah, but I guess what.
But there's no value in it.
Yeah, but
The
But no,
restriction
but
you
there
have
is-
on the library is based, I believe, on the prior year expenditure.
I think if I made the point that Mr. Cox is making is that we don't have to go through this gyration every year in the political back and forth and people screaming and yelling because they're looking at something that's being reduced in growth or being called a cut, which we've all been dealing with this time. And I think that's what you're trying to say is,
Yes.
if let's do it, let's take the heat one time and do it, and then just move forward based on that. And as I think about it, it's a good idea. The question is it something that we can do, is the question.
Mr. Chairman,
I'm Vice Chairman.
so, Mr. Attorney, you say that you can't bind future councils. We were bound by this educational millage. Yes, we were. We didn't, it was set up as an educational mill.
We decided the amount of dollars it's gonna be, and then the mill rate has never been adjusted in the past because nobody ever took it. It's the role of the council to do that. No one ever did it, so now we're adjusting it back so that the value of the mill is gonna set this mill rate that everybody gets to use. It's all down to the dollars. So next year, we're gonna just pick another amount of dollars, and next year the mill rate's the value of the mill is gonna be different. So the mill rate is inconsequential. The only reason anybody would ever set the mill rate is if you hope or think that it's gonna benefit you for something like a capital asset, a spending plan, where you think it's gonna grow year over year. And you're gonna see the value of that growth without having to come back and cover the political pressure that you're gonna get to raising your taxes. But I mean, the fundamental fact of it is, if you set it and it increases every year, you're gonna have the same problem that we have right now with the library. It's growing too much when we put that money over here. It's growing too little, now we gotta do something. Either way, you're making an adjustment.
Okay.
Let's just focus on the dollars, let the mill rate stuff get set. That's why the mill rate sets such a long period of time after we do the budget.
All right, so in a
That was-
sense, I'm sorry.
For the point, that was the reason I went to that elaborate, because we don't need to be talking about millage, we need to be talking about budgetary numbers, and I wanted to be clear about that.
So I'm cool with that, so,
You're talking about both sides of the same coin, we need to be talking about the edge of the coin, because it rolls on the edge of the coin.
Right.
The coin is the dollar.
so my argument, so I think that's kind of my point, but I'm just not communicating it right. I believe that rather than it being a road user fee of $20, and to your point, yeah. Hello? I don't know. But anyway, I believe that a road user, you can't go, you probably shouldn't go backwards on it, because now we're digging a hole where we don't need to be digging it. But if we can get to the point of where our roads are being paved based on a percentage of a budget that is set aside every year towards paving the roads, that it would be a lot easier for me as a taxpayer to go, okay, here's how much I'm paying for the schools, here's how much I'm paying for the library, and here's how much I'm paying for the roads. As opposed to a $20 fee or a $50. I mean, realistically, we could raise it to $100 because it's a fee. I don't want to do that, but I disagree with the premise of fees. And this puts us into a sustainable, long-term situation where we've got this set aside for our roads. It is this one?
My impression of the motion that's on the table right now is we're very specifically talking about the deal that we all made. So we voted for something absolutely didn't like, right? You know, we're gonna talk about funding roads. It's some of the folks that called me opposed to say the words courage. If we have the conscientious courage to take care of roads, that's a separate discussion. The deal that we all made so that we would vote for that thing, which for me was like, I'm not even going to retract my vote and go into the next discussion. It was that we're going to set the amount of money, we're going to come back and set the mill rate, and then that's it. What he's basically saying is that, part of the discussion was, okay, if the money is going to be spent for anything. What he's basically saying is, because we made that deal specifically for roads, when we're talking about roads, and the conscientious courage comes in and the willingness to look at a budget that clearly like this is growing at a rate that's outside of what we should be encouraging. And cut back for roads. If we don't do that, if we're not saying, okay, this was cut specifically for roads, we did all this political BS for roads, the conscientious courage that's going to take to have a moral background to go back to all these other far-fetched plans to get a cent over here and to do that. You're not going to have the moral authority to do it. So if we're going to do this to save for roads, which is what we originally asked for, the only reason I was going to vote for it is if the museum was included. The whole discussion along the way was the museum was part of this, it was already a worked out deal. That gets yanked out by some kind of bullshittery that I still don't understand. Then let's go back and fund the roads with the mail we're going to say. That is conscientious courage. We're fighting to do this for roads for a very specific reason. Hey, Mr. Public, we might ask you guys to raise taxes over here and pay another fee, but look at us, we're cutting budgets that are clearly overblown to pay for roads. Here's the money and the amount that we did it for. That's almost an entire mile that we can pay. 2 lanes. That's what we're talking about. Is it?
All I'm saying is, the money, instead of just going in the general fund where it was, it's gonna be dedicated to roads.
I really think we're saying the same thing, except I think Roy's saying let's take it to the next level and just call it like it is. And well, but no, I think it's just one of those. I really think we're all saying the same, and you correct me and make sure I understand you correct. But I think you're saying if we're going to do it, let's call it like it is. Let's make it a long-term plan,
Right.
So where it just continues.
And so what is this long-term plan?
Wait a minute, I
To
think
eliminate
I
the
might
road
have- I
fee?
might have an answer
Councilman
here.
Whitehurst.
The reason this has been a problem is because the library has always had a set millage, okay? If we just make in this motion that every year the millage will be adjusted automatically to match the budget.
What that would mean,
And so we don't have to go through this rigmarole, whatever budget they have, the millage automatically gets set to match that budget.
what I was gonna say is, if you did that, if you did that, then staff would know that going into the formation of the budget that we submit to you in the late winter, early spring.
So, is that something that makes feasible sense?
Yeah, I mean, in other words, I don't understand going through the process of we're gonna go through a reduction again to equal to what, if we're gonna do this, then just do it.
Yeah, but you're not gonna have to, the millage is gonna get reduced to, let's say to 5.3. So then next year, when the library comes to put its budget out, we're gonna start at 5.3. If they want more than
But
that,
here's the problem, is that we have to have this whole discussion again, because
you
let's
have
say.
that discussion every time you set the millage.
I know, no, we don't.
You should.
We don't, but we don't do
You
the
should.
budget, like, look at the budgets of the rest of the county. When the budget for the sheriff's office is, we don't discuss what the millage rate's gonna be for that.
But
The
he doesn't have
millage
a
is
millage
automatically adjusted to the budget. That's not the case with the library. That's why this whole discussion came
Correct.
out. So if we just say, moving henceforward, our policy will be that whatever amount we have set for the library funding, the millage rate will automatically be adjusted to meet that.
That makes sense.
treats them the
I,
same as everybody
That
else.
treats
I,
them
I
the same.
agree with that.
So.
Well, actually, no, they're still gonna have their own millage rate,
Understand, but it will be set to match the budget, not,
the local commitment.
right, the local commitment, whatever we decide.
That's fine.
And the discussions on the local commitment will be through our budgetary
And that'll be our-
process.
I agree with that.
So,
Okay.
can I make a motion to amend your motion?
Just make a substitute motion.
Substitute motion to repeat him, but to say, hence moving forward, the budget for the library,
Local commitment.
the local commitment will, the millage will automatically be, adjusted to meet whatever local commitment we have. Does that make sense, staff, in the way I'm saying that? So we don't have to have this discussion every time.
Still have to vote.
And
on
what
it,
it
though.
does, it limits that growth that's going on into that.
So I have a substituted motion on the table. Do I have a second for the substituted motion? Second by Councilman Wilson.
Okay, so I just want to understand. So basically, you're gonna take the local commitment, you're gonna divide it by the value of the mill, and you're going to adjust the value of the mill automatically each year.
Correct, which is the way the budget should be done anyway.
Yeah, I was just assuming every time you vote on those millage rates, you do that. Do you not?
No, it happens with every department except the library, because they had a millage that was set.
Okay. All right, that's good enough.
Vice Chairman, I tell you, it seems
No,
like you have
no,
something else to add.
no, I'm good.
Motions to do what we're supposed to already do,
But do it every year.
do it every year.
It's a good idea.
Any other discussion on that? All those in favor, please signify by raising your hand. And that does carry. Anything else on?
I'd like to make a motion that we fully fund a deputy coroner as part of our budget. I know that, Mr. Greeno, you were supposed to get back with us on,
I'll second your motion.
sorry, Mr. Chairman, go ahead. I'll let you talk.
No,
Sorry.
you go ahead, go ahead.
No, I knew that we were trying to figure out ways to pay for that.
Yeah, the coroner came to me back to this, so she's coming up, I don't know, consulting and contractual statements, be able to pay for that.
So are you saying the cost is $71,000 and she's gonna actually absorb all of it?
She came back and the salary down by $5,000, and she has enough savings in consulting and contractual, the way she's rearranged all her costs.
So the budget amount that we're giving her will not change?
Not in total. Consulting and contractual will go down to
Which page?
$130,000, and that will offset the cost to add that deputy coroner position.
What's the total savings that she got?
That's what it was approximately, I think she went from $200,000 to about $138,000.
Okay, so your budget recommended for her is $433,352. That's on page 91.
Yes.
That's not going to change?
Not in total, so within the line item.
Okay, but we're still gonna allocate the $433,352. Okay, that's great. Very good job.
Any other discussion on that?
I just want, because the coroner job is by definition a terrible job. I just want to make sure I understand. She negotiated some sort of contractual savings to get services done somewhere else, a la carte instead of home service, but as a monthly pay, or a monthly pay versus a la carte. One way or the other, she's netted us savings to the county by X percentage, and all we're voting to do is allow her to make a full-time position, which is honestly adding stability to the coroner's office. The second person that's available, and if she moves on to something else or quits or whatever, somebody to carry through. That's what we're talking about here.
It actually would be a third full-time position. So currently she's operating with 1 full-time and 2 part-time. And the recommendation was 2 full-time, 1 part-time. I believe, if I understood the motion correct, Vice Chairman's adding another full-time position which will be funded by this savings.
We're not spending any more money, but we're making a significant change in one part.
Correct.
It could adjust, not in what we're doing with services, I think we're just paying $20,000 per quarter, but there could be some, this may have to go up, depending on the money we're going for that. And that's
Just like with any budget, though, it can vary based on how many people die, how many people get
Well, the
toxicology reports, all that stuff.
removals and even as toxicology, that could vary from year to year based on the number of deaths.
So
But it's a fixed cost on consulting.
and we're currently, it could vary based on deaths because we're currently paying per autopsy. With the new program, we'll be paying a flat for as many autopsies as we can squeeze in. But you're right, your transport and your other could vary, but that's the way it is today.
The other savings is $66,280. We project costs, depend on health insurance, savings $65,500.
Any other discussion on that motion? Hearing none, all those in favor, please signify by raising your hand. Any other discussion?
Mr. Chairman, I know we had talked about, and I don't know if this is something that they worked out details on, but I know Mr. Wilson and Mr. Sater were talking about an additional person with Alliance Pickens that was dedicated to the small business, and also that gave almost to Mr. Wilson's point, somebody who's in there learning the ropes and kind of knows what's going on. Did we have any other, before, I'm not making a motion yet, did we have any discussion on the possibility of paying for that, or you?
Mr. Administrator?
Yes, we looked at that, and we can afford to pay for that based on the increase, and this is reflected in the budget book you have in front of you, that we anticipate coming from the state aids to subdivisions. So the amount of money we get from Columbia is going up, and it'll be more than enough to,
It's on your new handout.
128.
Page 56. Based on the changes that the council made in the increase for investment there, about $86,000 in general fund. It could be used for that.
Oh, so the general fund is gonna bring in an extra $86,000?
Yeah, it hasn't been allocated. Based on the changes that council has made.
What is this, what's that, the local aid to subdivisions, is that what it is?
We didn't know how to put the budget together, so I wanted the same number. And it looks like they're gonna be able to fund us an increase of about $150,000.
Mr. Wilson, you have something?
So we don't have a motion,
No, we do not.
Not yet, it was just a question, is if we could afford it.
so we've got a motion to have a.
Well, we got a motion to have a discussion about the whole budget in general, so.
Okay, so what we had talked about, some of the amendments that we had, what we talked about in the executive session. We talked about the need for, someone to the room to carry forward, to give us an ideal candidate until we get going. And whether or not they grow into the role, we have to hire the role, and somebody that adds consistency in case frameworks on, that offers some skill sets that match areas where we might really,
Focus.
right now in the organization. But the focus is on all the other areas outside of the park, which really not getting a lot of attention at this point. Ray was hired in, and his focus in his job description was to develop out the park. And clearly, we had a whole sales pitch about doing the park expansion. So that's probably gonna be a big piece of his time. Am I incorrect?
That's it.
Okay, but here's your opinion. The organization needs a glide path towards sustainability and resource wise. And since they don't have that right now, we need somebody in there to add some things, but also to give us that carrier. The relationship, it's all about relationships, it's all about that. I think that's, I'll make the motion to hire someone for that role.
No, I'll second.
And what's the cost of that?
Some of the costs, remember, the rock rate will cost $6,000, two vehicles was $64,000.
Yeah, you're talking about the road control.
Estimate is $90,000, salary.
So what are we gonna do with the extra $60,000?
That was gonna, that's what I'm over, that was gonna pay for two vehicles, probably. So if it's $150,000 that we're getting, and this is gonna cost $90,000, you've got about $60,000 left. That will pay for the two vehicles.
For litter control.
Okay.
And it leaves the half position that's currently split with the industry.
It would leave that position with your motion that's on the table.
And what exactly is this supposed to be doing?
What are you talking about?
Position?
The new?
So he summed it up the best he could because we had a lot of discussion in executive session. But this new position would focus on areas outside of what Mr. Farley is currently focusing on to open up new areas of economic development in the county and kind of, he used the term glide path, if you will, for the future, succession plan, whatever, for the future. With the talk that we've had over expanding the industrial park, if that were to come to fruition, that was Mr. Farley's initial was to work on the industrial park, and then anything else that fell. This new position would stay outside of the industrial park, and then if anything fell in versus falling out.
I guess that's why I was kind of confused a little bit. Ray Hardy, everyone seemed to think that he was hired to build the industrial park out. Where did that come from? I mean, I've been on this thing 11 years, and it was never said his job was to fill the industrial park.
Can I give an example of where I'm coming from? Because I think I'm in Valorant, but I don't know. Had a conversation with a young man, and his company's about the size of mine. We shared some of the local fabrication with those guys. I do all the engineering work in my place. He does engineering work in his place. And one of the reasons we started talking is because we have so much overlap and we don't compete. And I'm trying to put a pool together with folks like that all need the same kind of things so we can help each other. His biggest problem was that he was in a facility that wasn't well developed for his purposes, transportation-wise, et cetera. And when he started talking to me about it, I had also been talking to the guy that owns the old Wyoming place up there and had seen that giant concrete building that he had, which is basically new. And so I just mentioned to him, hey, I think you'd be treated like a rock star in Pickens County. At his size, what he was thinking about growing to over 3 years, to me, it's the kind of company that we should attract for our county because the types of jobs it brings, et cetera, et cetera. In Henderson County, they never even talked to me because it's so small. When I was looking at introducing people to them and talking into it, it just came down to dollars and things and after a while, we just got to the point we had to, the guys that want to grow and it came together. But as well, I think it was pretty well. I thought nothing was great about it, but it wasn't really in Ray's kind of look, right? I didn't talk about it directly because I didn't want to name like this guy or whatever. Eventually I stopped doing it. I didn't have somebody I could call or something like that. So I called Ken, and for me the problem is there's so many places across the county that could be an asset that we're developing. Nobody seems to get picked there when somebody's coming in from somewhere else. They don't seem to get introduced to these cotton mills, to these sugar mills.
Well, I mean, are they?
Have anybody that does that right now? I can't say why Ray was hired. I don't think that was the focus of what we've been doing. But right now we have nobody to follow him along. Maybe it's not the guy that places it, but the guy that steps in will find it. And if Ray's job was to do that, the potential is that we're going to do this expansion over here, then the idea that you would have somebody that could focus on, I mean, everybody's constantly mentioning the fact that we have this giveaway programs to attract folks. But what do we do with the folks we currently have? Is somebody going out to them and saying, hey, you're in this industry, these are some grant programs you're going to identify. Hey, you're in this area, I think I just talked to a company that's moving to Greenville, they could use a person like you. I've just not seen that. So, put it this way, I've never had a job in our county. I would have loved to move my business to the county, right? Coming into Anderson, I mean, my business is 4 times larger than it was 4 years ago. I'm not even a speck of anybody's radar, but my business is doing a significant amount of work in comparison to some of the companies that we've seen before.
I was going to say small to medium-sized business, and then the retention piece because of what he just said, because you get them small to medium and then they become large businesses before you know it.
I agree with all that.
And if Mr. Farley is doing nothing but what he's doing, he doesn't have the time or resources or depth, bandwidth, I like that phrase, bandwidth to do it all by himself.
I see, that's where I disagree. His job is we pay him a lot of money to develop economics and stuff and retain. And he has relationships with all these companies. Now, if he's not doing that, he's got
Mr. Whitehurst, that is not the issue. It is not. And I hear what your concern is, and I share your concern. I want you to know that.
No,
but in terms of what Mr. Farley is doing, he's one of the hardest working guys we've got. Now, it becomes a bandwidth, I think is the word I'll adopt. Question 4, can he be working to recruit these 2.5 million? I'm sorry, what?
Has he come to us and brought this issue?
He's mentioned it to me on multiple occasions in terms of, he would like to grow his staff and their capabilities. But this came about through a discussion. It's a council level discussion.
Yeah, that's correct. I just feel like it's something that we ought to be talking to the person who's going to be affected.
But the only reason I weigh in is because I know I just finished my second direct evaluation of him. I pay very close attention to what he does, and I know how hard he works. And so I know that's not the implication.
Is he planning to retire?
He is, there's no plan, anytime short term. I mean, I think from what he's conveyed to me, he hopes to work with us until he retires, but that's some years hence.
Vice Chairman has a question.
No, wait, just a point. So, I don't think that he was hired specifically just to do the part. Excuse me. I know that he has worked outside of that. Under the Carolina Moon is a great example. The U.S. Frozen Waffles is another great example. He has done those things. I also know that I have been a part of conversations with potential folks, and I've looked at there's 100 different pieces of property across the county that it's difficult for one person to focus on, to their point on the bandwidth. This just gives us that opportunity to take advantage of the resources that we have using money that I don't think we need to stick any money in the general fund. I think this gives us an opportunity to service a county. We're 122,000 people. We're not a small county.
I understand. I guess my point is, it just seems like he ought to be involved in the conversation as to what he's looking for.
I guess where I'm
going. Employee this time?
No, he did not ask for this employee, although when I explained to him that the council had talked about this long-term, this continuity, this training and bringing it on, he was very excited about that and said that he would have asked for this years ago if he thought it was a possibility. He's very excited. He says, does a county our size need staff this size? Absolutely. So he knows that if given the opportunity with this employee, that they have more than enough work for this employee to do.
And here's my flip to that. I've heard time in and time out, and right now as we speak, Easley City is voting on annexation of a piece of property that's in a donut hole. And the big argument is controlling growth. You can control growth by directing growth, and if you're involved, you can help direct. But if not, I hate to say it, guys, we're kind of Wild West in a lot of the unincorporated areas of this county, and all I have to do is go buy a piece of property, and I can build what I want, and I can open what I want, and you can't stop me. But if you are involved with an economic development office that can kind of help steer, direct, it's true the Wild West is still there, but you can kind of help control a lot of your growth and your burden and your headache. So think of it from that point of view as well.
My question, Mr. Chairman, is
Mr. Saban.
he spent his time on filling the industrial park. The industrial park's full now. He has a lot of free time, I would imagine. So I just, like I said, I'm not necessarily for this or against it. I'm just saying, his salary is 150.
No, nowhere close to that.
It's up to 6 figures, though, right?
Yes.
Barely.
Barely? Okay. Well, that's reasonable. At least we know that. So it's less than 100.
So, and I
More
will,
than 100.
and Mr. Said, I will.
That's public information. Anything over 50
Yeah,
grand.
you're right.
Public
You're right.
information. So my point is, I just don't understand. If the industrial park's now full, and he was spending a lot of time on the industrial park, couldn't he go out and spend time on working with existing businesses?
Mr. Said, I do want to say, because you have been part of the privileged conversations that we've had in executive session. It is full, and I know that brings up another subject that's really not on the table tonight, unless somebody wants to make a motion, we do something. But just because it's full at this moment doesn't mean there's not future potential there.
Okay, I want to make an amendment. I'm going to add an amendment. Okay. My amendment is to reallocate the $61,000 from Upstate Alliance, right, to road paving and patching. And we're going to just end the contract with Upstate Alliance. They have not brought us one job or one company.
Point of order, this has nothing to do with my motion.
Well, I'm making an amendment.
This is point of order. My motion
You're
was
not
to
saying
add a
that-
position, not had anything to do with Upstate
But you're
Alliance.
saying Upstate Alliance has nothing to do with that?
Upstate Alliance has nothing to
department?
do with adding this position. Has zero to do with that. This is Alliance Pickens.
If I'm not mistaken, he still has the right to make the amendment.
Mr. Chairman, there's one technical issue with that motion that there's no reason, the finance director just told me, I had forgotten this, there's no reason y'all would know this. That amount of money comes out of the park expense fund. You remember we established a park expense fund, so it has to be spent on expenses related to the park.
Can we put that as a separate motion, Mr. Saban?
Well, no, how about this? Why don't we end, I'm
I
gonna
have
make,
a motion
no,
that-
no, my idea is, we can tie that in. We could say, end the contract with Upstate Alliance and use the $61,000 in saving to pay for part of the salary. Does that tie into it now?
No, we
Yes, it
already have the
does.
money to pay for it.
So gentlemen,
No,
gentlemen,
we're gonna
gentlemen,
supplant that general fund.
is that your motion?
I'm gonna restate my motion. End the contract with Upstate Alliance and take the 61,000 and use it to pay for some of the salary of this new position. And the 61,000 that you have allocated to this position is coming from the general fund, will go back to the general fund. That's my motion.
So I have a motion to amend the original motion to take the 61,000 from Upstate Alliance to go towards this position. Do I understand that correctly?
Yeah, and the 61,000 that he wants to spend
And for the
political subdivision, that will go back in the general fund.
So that is the amendment to the original motion that's on the table. Do I have a second on that? All right, hearing no second.
And I'll tell you why in a second.
Hearing no second, that amendment fails. Back to the original motion on the table of adding the position to Alliance Pickens. Any other discussion on that?
Ray's got what, 8 years full time, somewhere in there. Consider the last third of that, probably, before that race. He's got 5 years. 5 years is enough time to train someone in this area, and we don't have anybody more. To me, anything that's important is economic development, long-term sustainability resource-wise. Being able to poach somebody from somewhere else to bring them in that has the experience level, or if we're able to bring somebody in younger and give them a career path to it. It seems to me, just from a resourcing perspective, we can do some things a little bit more appropriately with this organization. My preference, the reason why I put this forward, is I had conversations with Ray over the years, and I shared with him some of my frustrations and observations, and I shared with him input that I got from other folks that was working, with them, part of the guys from the Education Business Alliance, etc. And it was a lot of people that were coming forward, because there's not really a focus on existing business and somebody new business. And so I went to him and said, hey, why can't we do this? As a citizen, not on the council, but as a guy talking to Ray, build a relationship with Ray, getting to know Ray. And this is one of the things that was brought up. And as I started looking at it, like I was an operations manager, clearly there's not a carryover person there. He dropped dead of a heart attack, we're behind. He decided to get against the lottery, we're behind. There's lots of good reasons and bad reasons. To me, we don't feel sustainable. And for whatever, because I don't have to supervise him, Ken does. And I don't know what Ken's giving him as far as looking at what he's doing for a living. But it sounds like Ken is happy with the role that he's doing. He's Ken's guy. For me, the sustainability of it's important, carry is important, and we don't have to fund it for a second year because I don't have a direct impact on employers and families. We can stop funding it and then we can figure out a way to keep the guy. For me, there's a career element to this, there's a sustainable element to it, practicality to it, and I did have a conversation with Ray in an unguarded format, where he wasn't thinking he was definitely thinking of a role or anything like that. He was just saying that seeing what reason he couldn't do it, can we use his bandwidth? And he just said they're intuitive. So that's where I'm coming from. I don't have a history of relationship with him, other than sit on the council. It's just an unbiased observation from outside. That's why I brought it up in the executive session. And I think I was pretty open with you guys where I think there are weaknesses currently, which is the business side. I think that there has to be a complement and analog of that, to keep this organization moving forward. That's why I think it's important. The money piece of it, we can argue about that. That's good.
Any other discussion on the motion? Mr. Bannister?
I got one on the other side too. One of the things that I like to see is small industries in neighborhoods, kind of like the cotton mills were. And that way, people don't have to drive long distances to go to work. It gives them more free time.
Councilman Waters.
I'm gonna vote against this. Not because I don't think it's possibly a valid idea. I just don't think that we could go ahead and give a position to someone that's not asked for one without having a conversation with them about what they feel the position needs to be, how the position needs to be done. And I think we're just You know, we can talk about sustainability. You know, if Ralph has a heart attack tomorrow, we could have a problem too. You know, I don't think that's a valid argument to what we're looking at, but I think I would rather have a conversation with him to find out what he needs and what he's looking for before we go ahead and assign someone a spot. And I don't think you can reduce the size of government once you start hiring people. It's very difficult to fire if it doesn't work out. That's just my thoughts on it. So
I'm going to give Mr. Roper credit. He's found ways through attrition and through various methods to where actually we have smaller departments in some areas that we've ever had, and that's the nicest way I know to say that. I think this ultimately rides to your point. Mr. Farley works for Mr. Roper, and ultimately, if Mr. Roper feels like this department can't utilize or use this position, I would expect him to say so now. Because Mr. Farley is going to do what Mr. Roper requests, or obviously he's going to be in a bad spot. So with Mr. Roper understanding what we've talked about and understanding what that department is and how it functions, is there anything other than what you already have shared? I mean, is there hesitation there?
We brought this up in executive session 2 months ago.
Yes.
Right, so in that time, you've had
Several conversations. I meet with Mr. Farley once a week. Several conversations about how we could utilize this position. He actually gave me a full write-up of what he started as the startup of a job description. I don't have that with me at the moment. But he says that this position exists in similar sized counties. It's called a project manager. It's the next guy up the chain or down the chain from him. And this person would basically have a subset of Ray's responsibilities. He would be training on the AA ball field before he went to the bigs. Okay, that's he or she would be training at AA ball before they went to the big leagues. He says it's commonly done in economic development organizations that are our size or slightly larger. So he had a good idea of what we were talking about. He said it would definitely be utilized, and was excited that you all were considering it.
I have a question. Ralph, you have a transfer in of $447,000 this department. Where's that? The only thing I'll say is, and I'll actually support this very skeptically. We spend about $500,000 on his department. We've got Upstate Alliance, which is $61,000 of that. They've no jobs, no companies. We've got this school district county council employee. We talked about it for a good 20 minutes. I have no idea what his added value is. So this entire process needs to be looked at. Where's Alan Quinn? That whole effort needs to be assessed, what their contribution has been, and that really needs to be part of the agenda going into the next fiscal year. Because honestly, 2 things I've seen that we've pulled out of there, which is Upstate Alliance and this employee we spend with the school district, I don't see any added value with them at all. But having said that, I'll support this, but I'm really hoping that we'll assess this department and see what they've actually done, what these people are doing.
So you remember Ron Weber from the school?
Yes.
He had an analysis of Peggy, and the role that Peggy did was half of what current role was for. And then the other side of it there was a movement, but it's not a full-time job to do it more, that's why I think that it was short-sighted when it sort of got pushed forward. Ron and I had a nice discussion with someone from the radio, someone from the point, and then I had to, can I get half the guy and someone else half the guy. I don't think anybody recognized that any joint venture is a 49-50. Because I think it was sort of an even split, so now you've got somebody that's in limbo, who's not directly reporting in an effective way to someone with a broadcast, what's next to them. So there is probably a limbo on that probably shouldn't be about establishment with other review. Is it having an impact or not having an impact? I don't know. I'm not part of those organizations anymore, so I don't know. But there was a good attempt to it, but I think from an operational perspective, it definitely should be more than anymore. He should be 100% rolled up, and the other guy's just a dotted line. So I don't know who's most important. So I think we just did 2 dotted lines and one for one of the ones. That's the way we think.
Any other discussion on this motion? Hearing none. All in favor of the motion to add this position, please signify by raising your hand. 4, all opposed. 1. 5-1, sorry. I'll learn to count.
Mr. Chairman, what was we were gonna get some recommendations on pay. Are there any recommendations coming from the administration on that?
Mr. Rook.
Yes, we've been looking at that since council talked about that, I believe, at the second reading last Monday. We have some ideas that we would like to address in terms of how to use a portion of that money. Specifically, I'll start with our lowest paid employees, our recycling attendants. Our recycling attendants make $9.92 an hour. They could walk off the job one day, go over to McDonald's and get a big pay raise. It's not the most glamorous work in the world. So we would look and recommend as a part of this plan that we look at the recycling attendants' salaries and try to get them more in line so that we can attract more recycling attendants. Right now, we have 7 vacancies for recycling attendants. So it's hard to fill those out. That's as a position that's, not glamorous. Most of them are retirees, most of them are part-time. We need to be able to up that. The other thing we've talked about doing is looking at the motor equipment operators, our truck drivers, both our motor equipment operator 2 and our motor equipment operator 3, raising their salaries up in the sense of the 2s, raising them from $610 to $676, from the 3s from $1778 to $1846. Gets us closer to parity with some of the folks we're competing with. We have some technical oddities that are floating around still from the compensation study years ago, and without getting into specific departments, just to not exacerbate a problem, we have one department on that side of the building that have a position called Document Specialist 1. They have a cognate, another position in a different department on that side of the building that's called an Account Specialist 1. Their duties are largely indistinguishable, and there are 2 pay grades separating. So we would hope to propose in this that we fix that inequity. We would also want to look back at, and we don't have good data yet, although we've requested it, on our EMS full-time EMTs and our part-time EMTs to take care of those. We've also talked about cross-training our firefighters with EMT certification, and there needs to be some type of salary incentive for doing that. So we would propose using that money, some of this money that's out there for that. And then finally, as I have completed my division head evaluations, and we have now mandated to the division heads that they do performance evaluations of their department heads, that we provide some money for performance evaluation at the department head level. So we're still working out some of the dollar figures here, because a lot of this is going to be contingent on some things, but those are the concepts that we have right now about what we would do with the amount allocated by council for pay, for COLA, and then these proposals as well.
On the attendance, is there any room for outsourcing that, like the professor in the staff perspective?
Not at $9.92 an hour.
We've got 7 vacancies in the we don't got a mandate to $9.92 an hour. I don't know how the funding for that.
So one thing that we do for other positions in solid waste, and not to, I bring up this next part with some sense of trepidation, because I don't want to go into a can of worms when y'all want to. But the lack of inmates has made our building maintenance and our solid waste guys, some of our other departments, rely a lot more on temporary employees through the staffing agency that we use traditionally as MAU. Our MAU employees, we could look at attendance from MAU, but at that price point, attendance becomes a problem. There are screening issues that become a problem at that price point. So we really feel like, and I talked to the HR director as late as 5 o'clock today about that aspect of it, that we could really help by giving those attendants, our employee attendants, a raise as a part of this
I do
proposal.
think, to your point though, because I've had that thought, some of those positions may actually be better temporary positions or staffing agency positions. I do agree with that. I don't know if you've looked into it or not, because I don't know the details, it's just my gut.
We talked, I mean, the reason we have is because y'all recognize it's a good idea when you're looking at workers that maybe aren't. So what we've traditionally used is retired folks. But can we supplement that with some temporary workers? Right now, it's a challenge even for the temporary agencies. We had a conversation with a temporary agency earlier today because we had a couple of temps that didn't show up. They just didn't show up. And so we called the temporary agency and said, this is a problem, this keeps happening. And they said, yeah, it's happening to everybody right now. So there's a little concern with that.
I think when you have your older workers, you get more people on time, they're more reliable, and I think the idea of bumping their pay up a little bit to attract a little more of that field, I think would be better, because kind of running employees, they just don't show up with that too, or that one case is going to get.
Mr. Whitehurst, another thing, and I appreciate that, another thing that we've looked at today that's still germane to this is we right now have a job listed on our website and on the board out there for recycling attendant. Now, we need 7, but we've got 1 job posted. So an idea HR came up with today, which I appreciated, was let's post them for the specific centers. You, retired guy, might love to work at the Table Rock Recycling Station or at the Dacusville Recycling Station because of the community pride thing. So we're trying to double down on that.
I guess my question is, how do we pass a budget without a pay plan? Because we really don't have it. You haven't given us anything in writing.
So, Mr. Roper, are we talking 2% COLA with 1% going to this that you have? What does the math fall out at?
Yeah, so based on the conversation you all had, I felt I was somewhat constrained, and I'm very happy with this. 2% COLA, that other 1%, that 255, start looking at ways that we can make county pay work better. And so what I've given you is what we would propose to do with that.
But how much of an increase will these people, like these individual departments get?
I have not broken it down by department. I've broken it down. What we've looked at is what should we be paying different classes of
My fear is
employees.
that it's spread so wide that it really doesn't make an impact on anything. Like, for instance, like the example I gave you was EMS. EMS is underpaid. If we took the 101 workers and we divided it into the 255,000, that's going to be about $2,500 each. And if you prorate it for full-time and part-time, full-time people probably get about a $3,000 pay increase. The part-time people, 1,000. That's on top of the 2%. That's significant. That problem's solved. No. But now, if we're just spreading it out so wide, we're not really. Are we solving a problem in any department?
We certainly are, in the sense that I asked HR to look at our 4 or 5 biggest problems, and that's what they came back to me with.
But I mean, why don't we just do 2 this year and we'll do 2 next year?
Well, when it comes to, I don't want to get into individual employees and putting y'all in the position of having to vote for an individual employee's raise or not. I don't want to get into that, but let me just say more broadly, if we're able to look at 2 or 3 of these, which I've given you 4,
okay.
4 that HR says, no, this is a problem that we can fix for that amount of money, that's a huge step forward for us.
But I mean, so
then if the market
are you saying,
That's right.
Is there anything wrong with saying the recycling people's pay is going to go from $9 to $12? Is there anything wrong with saying that?
Except I don't know that I want it to be $12. I
No,
might want it to be
$12.50
$12.50
I
or.
mean, you couldn't give us a schedule of that?
We probably could with that more granular detail, but not just in this amount of time.
I think the problem is you do a 2% pay raise for a $9 an hour account, you get 18 cents.
That's right.
That doesn't affect our ability to get people to come in.
No, but it's the add-on it's the add-on that matters. My point is I don't want to spread the add-on so thin that if the pay's only going from $950 to $975, right. Why bother?
But no, because I think that's where you have HR come in and go, okay, we know if we can get to this point, because we know what the market is. Okay, so we know a little better what the market is, and you know, we've had struggling issues with particular positions for years.
Right.
You know, but we've always done a 2% across the board, a 3% or one time, and it never fixed inequities, and it left us, you know, with a bunch of vacancies, or we have someone that comes on board, we train them, and they leave.
But do you feel confident that, given what we're given now, that the problems in these 4 areas are going to be fixed? Because I don't.
I think it's a better solution than what we've done in the past.
I think it is a better. Hey, it was my idea. I think it's a great idea. But the thing is, I just think that without seeing numbers, of roughly how much these people's pay are going to be increased. I don't know if I could vote to do this, because it might be spread too thin. I don't know.
And I appreciate what you're saying, because you want it to
Vice
have.
Chairman.
I'm sorry.
I believe that it's incumbent upon staff to come up with that. I don't think we need to sit up here and decide, you make this, you don't make enough, let's give you some more. I don't think it's our job to pick the winners and losers. I think it's our job to say, here's how much money you've got, and you need to make the best use of this, because if you don't, we're holding you accountable. So if you believe that it is the recycling center guys, that's where it's going to be, then that's going to be the best return on investment. If you believe it's EMS, then that's where it's going to be. But we need to give you the ability to do that rather than us decide who wins and loses.
And under what I'm saying is we do give him that ability. I just want to see how much he's doing.
Yeah, but here's the thing, he's gonna come back to us with a plan. If we don't like it, we say, Kent, that's too thin.
So that would be another day we'll vote that up?
We have the ability, we're gonna get to review what he does.
Okay, that's fine. If we're gonna.
All we're doing is voting on the money.
If we're gonna vote on the 2% for everybody and 1% for
He's coming
the
up with a
targeted
plan to present
increases.
to us and say,
And then
here's
he's
how I
gonna
want
come back with a plan and show us what we're doing, and we could vote on that again. I'm
So-
all for it.
So actually, what we're doing tonight is saying, we're gonna set aside this 3%. We understand your ideas, you're gonna give everybody a 2%, this is what you're gonna do with the other 1%. You know that that extra 1% is very sensitive to us, but what we're voting on tonight is to set aside that 3% total, and that is all we're voting on tonight.
And the allocation of 2%, 1%.
Okay.
I would, my, an organization that has so little attrition on track it. What I would say is, going into next year, because we want to know how he wants to do it, clearly. I don't want to constrain that, because I want to do it, I didn't want to do that. We are managerial people, but this is a way to use data points. Going into next year, I would like to have a measured sort of an impact statement. You know, we were able to hire more people, we focused in this area, we picked up more people, we did this, we did that, so that if it does have that impact on the goals, it makes it simpler, then we might be incentivized to do it. Because I think that we all, like the piece of these using the next governmental management, that's exactly what we're talking about here. Let the A players benefit financially from their impact.
I think what you're saying applies to the previous conversation as well. You want to know, if you allocate the money, that we report back to you and say, this is what you bought. So I see that. I think that applies to Alliance Pickens as well.
All right, now, there wasn't a motion, that was just general discussion. That motion is already there, and it's already in the budget at 3%. We voted at the last meeting, and I don't remember the exact verbiage, but the 3% was clarified in the last meeting, so we don't need another motion and vote on that. There's been no change in that, if I understand correctly.
I have a motion, Mr. Chairman.
Motion, go ahead.
I'd like to take the 61,000 and allocate towards Upstate Alliance and give it to Ray Farr's budget to use in recruiting.
So I have a motion on the table to take the 61,000 from Upstate Alliance and give it to Mr. Farley for recruiting, is that correct?
Recruiting business.
Recruiting business, whatever.
Use it for bringing in business.
Okay, I have a motion, do I have a second?
I'll second that.
Second by Councilman Seda, discussion.
So I have a question. We give it a raise, part of this budget, the basis because they spend this on else.
Well, and I asked a question to Ray before about this. See, Alliance is very interesting over the years. They used to claim they were a recruiting company because we used to get monthly reports, if you remember, about how many phone calls they did and how many companies they reached out to. And then when we kept coming back and they go, well, none of this is pertaining to Pickens County. And then they started to change who they were and say, well, we're not really a recruiting company, we're a marketing company. And so what we've had is a whole change of stuff. We have never, I don't believe we have ever received a benefit for that. When we did get out of it, we gave the money to Ray, and Ray actually brought in that German company that we did both the ribbon on when y'all first came on. That was from the money that he would have had, that would have gone to Upstate Alliance. He went out and recruited those guys and brought somebody in here. I know it's not a popular among this council, but I just feel like every year it's something I feel very strongly about. Just because I've had experience with this, and that's just,
Mr. Chair.
that's my thoughts on it.
Vice Chairman.
So I agree. I don't like the idea of it feeling like it's a country club or that we have to pay membership dues. However, I do know that the large corporations that come in through the Secretary of State's office, Bobby Hitt, or whatever, Secretary, whatever, that funnels then to wherever. I know that if we're not a part of the Upstate Alliance, or if the folks down in the lower part of the state are not a part of their alliance, he doesn't funnel to them. Right now, we're the only, if we would vote against this, we'd be the only county in the state not a part of an alliance that offered these services. I think they are horrible at presenting the why we should be a part of them. I don't know why in the world he doesn't stand up there and say, the last company that came, you would not have had you not been a member of Upstate Alliance, because I do believe that. Because after talking to the CEO of the company and hearing his conversations about the direction that he went, where he originally wanted to go to Texas, and then he was wanting to go to Greenville, and it was because of the relationship with Upstate Alliance that he even took a look at Pickens, because they call Ray Farley. So there's one company right there alone. I think not being a part of it sets us apart from the state, and we're basically telling the state of South Carolina, we don't want to do business the way you're doing business. We think we can do it better.
Well, I respectfully disagree, and that's fine, we can disagree.
I know.
You know, he said he came from Greenville's part of Upstate Alliance, and so it wasn't anything that was different.
Right, Greenville is part, but
But the fact that whether we were a part of that or not a part of that, you know, we've recruited without Upstate Alliance, and we've recruited very successfully. And part of my whole problem is the whole concept of the alliances is government giving money to government.
It's actually government giving money to quasi-government.
Yeah,
they're not governmental.
but it's government. You can call it quasi-government, but it's government. You know, and we pay these people these huge salaries of the taxpayers of Pickens County to pay for these people to be able to be in charge of the money that they should have themselves.
So, and one way to look at it, and when I started thinking about it this way, it kind of changed my view a little bit. But we pay them $61,000 a year. Ray gets to go on X number of exhibition trips, is what I'll call them, and it's either a trip for recruitment or a trip to follow up, but they pay for that, and then he gets to go to these, what do they call those, not development, the planning, whatever, these folks that, I'm a big company and I want to go somewhere, and I get with this group and they say, okay, this, what do they call that?
It's, Mr. Chairman, it's a like an industry consultant group.
Right.
People that do economic development, recruiting site locations, those sorts of things.
Site, whatever. It's something guild is what they call it. Anyway, all these different things. So it is putting Mr. Farley in front of a lot of people. I understand what you're saying. I mean, I can cold call anybody and I can go out and do sales. And you're right, he can do it without it. But I think that judging his success without fully looking at the big picture of what Upstate Alliance does bring to the table, and because I was with you, and when you say, I want to know what business you brought me, sometimes that is difficult to measure, and I don't like that answer because I like to measure things. But in looking at it at what they do provide for him, and then even some of the data work that they're able to do for Mr. Farley that we're not paying somebody else to do, is something else they bring to the table. So you got to look at it kind of bigger picture than just they recruited this company or that company. Because too, and it's ironic, Peabody's things right there. I did speak with the folks from Peabody, and you're absolutely right. The Upstate Alliance is why they kind of got plugged in with Ray. So it's hard to say, would they have found Ray without him? Maybe. But he was with them, and they definitely found him.
So here's my question. My first comment was, I don't want to micromanage the guy because I don't want to do his job. I got no interest in promoting his job. My question is, if it's 61 grand and we give it to Ray and ask him where he spends it, and he spends it on the line, and we stop, it's just, it's an amount of money for him to use whatever way he wants to, and Ray is the guy that does it for a living professionally for a big chunk of his life. He spends it on those guys, then it's none of our damn business. You know. So can we do that? Is it, because whatever your motion was, we give it to Ray to spend, on a way that's impactful. If you say you can't do that thing over there, then that's not a governance level element for us. Why are we picking the tool chest? If I say you can't have a crescent wrench and I want you to loosen up a whole bunch of bolts. He says, well, the best way to do the crescent, do that is the crescent wrench. Well, I don't like it because of the political BS and all this other stuff. Yeah, I just want to gotta fix my machine. So can we just, if by your motion, we're saying, here, you can have the 61 grand, spend it in an impactful way. If you fix the economic alliance, we wouldn't like that. That's not governance, that's micromanagement, that's not a role.
I have a question.
Well, I've asked him that question before. If you had to pick between Upstate Alliance or 61,000, you know, I got a dead silence.
But when was that question
Because,
asked?
Well, this was,
Several years ago.
no, while we were, well, you were part of council.
4 years ago. It was
I
4
asked
years
the
ago.
question, he's like, I want as much as I can get.
But I do think too, but for clarity's purpose, if Mr. Farley spends the 61,000 on Upstate Alliance, are we gonna have an issue with that? That's the question.
I think it's
Right.
fair enough to say to him, I don't have, if you say, Ray, you get $61,000 to spend how you want.
And he chooses to spend it on Upstate Alliance. We don't have an issue with that.
Then he's saying that the value is great enough. I'm not convinced the value is great enough. But if he says, yeah, all that 61,000, but if he knows he has the money available to him to spend another way, in other words, all those trips that they supply on, you think how much that costs versus the 61,000. You know, how many trips is he able to make to Germany out of that and build those relationships with all that 61,000? Because that was all funds that he had available to spend any way he wanted to. Okay, versus, you know, when you're picking and we pay the same amount as Greenville and Spartanburg do. It's funny how that works. They set the limit right at our population to being the minimum. So the point is, yeah, I would be fine to say to him, hey, here's $61,000. You can spend it any way you want to for economic development. And if you feel like that full 61,000 is what you get $61,000 worth of value out of it, then I won't ever bring it up again.
Is there any other department out there where we say, I think the sheriff's department is probably part of some sort of sheriff's national, whatever. Is there any other department where we prescribe whether or not they can be part of that professional body or whatever? Or we just give them a pool of money and they spend it for that particular service? Because here's my question. If we go to them and say, we don't want to do it, but Ray says, can I pay you guys for some other card stuff, like all the research you said you did? Will you charge me 10 grand for that? I can take my other 51 and do something else with it. I mean, they got to be flexible in what they do. They can't be an all or nothing. I mean, it's fun to do.
My question, I have a question.
Mr. Sada.
Okay, back to the question I asked you before. You said the money going into the Alliance Pickens was about $500,000. 447 comes from the general fund. 52 comes from the state. 52 comes from the school district. So how is it? So I want to re-ask the question I asked. How is the 61,000 spent on Alliance, Upstate Alliance, coming? It's coming from the general fund.
You talking about the dues for the Upstate Alliance?
Yes.
I'm not sure where the 61 is coming from. The Upstate Alliance dues are $58,000.
I thought they were 50. He said 61. I
Oh,
thought
okay,
61 was
so
correct.
okay.
That's why I thought it was 50.
Okay,
He said 61. I
Okay,
went with his
okay,
number.
so Upstate Alliance, okay.
I figured it might have gone up.
That's 58,000.
Yeah, if we're on page 111. You'll see the economic development is $58,000.
Okay.
That comes out of Park State Fund or Commerce Park Fund. That's money that comes back, it pays itself back when we recruit business. We pay ourselves back off the taxes for what it costs us to recruit that company.
So where is the revenue showing up? Which page?
Well, right now, I think everything is the first one, where it is our revenue, the Commerce Park, and then that's. Okay. So, I think that's a little over $500,000. So no revenue is coming in right now. Right now, we're using fund balance to pay for Upstate Alliance.
Okay, because that was my question. I thought it was anyway. So the Upstate Alliance, 58,000 is coming from the general fund.
No, it's coming from the park system.
It didn't in 2019, but in 2020 it did. Is that correct?
Correct, in 2020.
So what is the source of that revenue then? Tell me one more time.
It's the money, when we, like Taylor made, say we spent $500,000 for, drain that land and getting the cost of that land.
Okay.
We reimburse ourselves first, before we start getting the taxes to the city, if they're in the city, or the school. So we reimburse ourselves that money, so we put in a special revenue fund, which is created by council for the tax of
Okay.
So essentially what happens is that fee in lieu, we get the full fee that we're paying.
I got you. I understand.
Right.
And what we've been using that money for the most part, is, update line.
So then that money, but that money can't be used for anything but that. Okay.
It's not what it is,
That's fine. That answers my question.
Think about that.
I thought that was on 128. It's not.
because nobody else gets cut
I thought it was
until,
on page 128. It's not.
Well, what they do is they set the amount.
I know,
Okay.
but,
It's a little different. Maybe.
That
but it's
sounds.
the
that's-
same design, nobody's gonna get a cut until we
I
put it
see.
back whole.
Okay, that's good.
Oh, no, I get it. Just said, does that answer your
That
question?
answers my question. Yeah. Very good.
Any other discussion?
So the motion on the table is to give Mr. Farley this funding, and then he decides whether he's a part of Upstate Alliance or not.
That'd be a little different motion, but I'm willing to accept that.
It's the gist of the motion. The motion is to not fund Upstate Alliance and give that money to Mr. Farley. That is the motion on the
Yes.
table.
Yes.
And what Mr. Farley decides to do with it is up to Mr. Farley.
Okay, so,
So if he wants to buy a new car with it, he can buy a new car with it. He just has to answer for it. But his cars actually come from the not-for-profit board, not from us anyway, so.
Like I said, it has to be related to the common part, and what that would be.
yeah, it would have to be,
There are some restrictions to how it's spent. The family vacation is probably.
So actually, his trips and those kinds of things could not come out of the funding unless you could directly tie it to the Commerce Park somehow.
It would be pretty easy to tie stuff he does as recruiting and anything that he does in his job based around that.
But there's a lot of discrepancy there. You have to
Yeah,
be very careful.
I'm gonna vote against this, just because I think that it's, you're putting too much of the emphasis on, you go do whatever you want to with it. I agree to Mr. Wilson's point that we don't need to get into his business, but I think this is something that's a little, this to me is like ACOG or any of those other things that we're a part of, and fortunately, Steve Pelletier does an incredible job at telling us how we get a return on our investment, and we don't get that same luxury from the comments we get from Upstate Alliance, but I do believe that we get our return just because I've talked to other people, not to John Lummis.
One thing that has bothered me is that we have all these fee in lieu with Oconee County, and they keep getting industry. When I first got on council, they were getting industry right and left, and we weren't getting any. And they were on Upstate Alliance.
Yeah, that's, you're looking for causation, not correlation. So hard to do. I don't want to tell anybody here how to do their job. I just want the government to tell them where we spend the money and measuring programs for value. I don't want to tell a guy to do the dance instead of pressing bench. If we give this guy the tools, we give the guy the funding that, that around it, he says that's the best way to spend the money, great. If he doesn't, that's great. Because I would like to see him either sink or swim. And if he doesn't put the money there and we have a terrible year, lots of complaints, lots of issues, he can't come back and say, well, you didn't let me have a little sale out. We didn't have to all those years. We weren't able to do this, this, and this. Dude, you choose. You're the department manager. You choose. We're not telling the roads and bridges guys what AutoCAD system or what CAD system to use. We're not telling the roads and bridges guys, any of the types of things that they're doing from a tools perspective. We're not getting in their pants about this stuff. So why are we in the pants for this guy, assuming that he has to use this thing that none of us really fully understand?
I agree with that.
Vice Chairman.
You make a very compelling argument, although Mr. Mr. Farley stated that he does not want us to be a part of Upstate Alliance and to give him the money in all of your conversations over the past few weeks.
He has never, in my conversations, told me that he would rather have the money than us be a member of Upstate Alliance. He's never addressed it in that
So I do think,
binary fashion.
I will admittedly say, because I feel like you have to be very careful with, and we've talked about this with communication in general, and sharing thoughts and opinions and putting our team members at bad spots. But you bring up a very, very valid argument. No other department do we say, we want you to be a member of this association and we're gonna pay for this. So you're right about that, and I've never thought about it that way. As much as Councilman Whitehurst would love for us not to be, I mean openly, not to be part of Upstate Alliance, I want us to be part of Upstate Alliance. But I don't know that it's my spot to say that, to your point, 100%. And maybe there's a new Upstate Alliance that I don't even know about yet, right? To your point, I think that's a very valid argument, but I think it's important for Mr. Farley to know that the tool is there and the money is there, and if he chooses not to use it, he knows as much as he's against it, I'm for it. You're not gonna make one of us happy. I mean, someone's gonna be upset either way. He needs to do what's best for his job, and he's got to answer for that.
But he's getting a review, and there's a financial element that he gets an incentive to it, right? That's right. He has the opportunity now through what you guys have pushed in the recent past to get a review that shows he's doing great or he's the D, right? And he's either an A, B, C, or D. And if he's the D and he comes back in here next time and he doesn't have some compelling reason why he did or didn't, then it's more to the point of if we're gonna measure God by performance, then you get rid of him for performance. Let him make all the decisions on which tools he needs.
I agree, except 4 years ago when we came on board, he flinched every time we spoke because he was trying to answer based on what individual councilman wanted or did not want.
And that's getting into personalities, and I don't want to get into personalities. We're talking finance, and I think that if Mr. Farley chooses, this council is not saying in this motion to not fund Upstate Alliance. It's saying don't line item fund it, put it in the pot, and if he wants to fund it, he can fund it. So no one can say this council voted against funding Upstate Alliance. That is not what the motion actually is, the way I understand it. Which is a very unique way to look at it.
Yeah, I like it.
Any other discussion? Vice Chairman, right? No? Okay. All those in favor of, I think you gave the $61,000
Should
to
be
you.
58, I stand corrected on that.
All those in favor, you gonna amend that or substitute that? I was gonna say, take the money from Upstate Alliance
Yeah,
and
take
put
the
it
money.
in to be used as Mr. Farley, whatever you said. The motion is to not fund, ultimately the motion is to not fund it, but put it there for Mr. Farley to do.
How he wants.
Yeah. All those in favor of this motion, please signify by raising your hand. Opposed? It's 4-2. Anything else we want to discuss tonight?
I have a question and possibly a comment in the motion.
Mr. Saban?
The mental health, the $20,000, what's the source of that money? Okay. Is this the first time we'll be given that money? Okay. Here's what I want. I want to make a comment and then I'm going to make a motion. Mental health, I think, is a state function. I think what we should do is focus on leveraging behavioral health services as our mental health arm. They're looking for a bigger building. I think that we asked Mr. Roper to work with the school district, the city of Pickens, who's also working with behavioral health services, the state, and behavioral health services themselves, to find a bigger building so that they can expand and provide more services. I think that's going to have much more impact than the $20,000. So my motion is to not fund the $20,000, put it back in the general fund, and focus on the bigger picture, which is trying to help them get off Main Street and get a bigger building.
So I have a motion on the table to cut the $20,000 for mental health and to focus on helping behavioral health get off of Main Street and get into a bigger building. Do I have a second?
I'll second that.
Second by Councilman Wilson. I'm going to take the privilege here to share what I know about mental health and behavioral health, especially here in Pickens County. It actually is an area that I know a lot about, unfortunately, sadly. Mr. Roper's administrative assistant, Jessica, probably knows even more than she ever wanted to know at this point about all of the above. Mental health is a huge problem in Pickens County. You are correct. The state mental health system was actually put into place long before the state was a state. It was when we were Carolina or the Carolina, whatever, before North and South Carolina split, the mental health program was in effect prior to that. It has not kept up with the growing population. Pre-COVID, I was working with a delegation, talking with a delegation about is it time to split off this triad that we currently have? Because if you look back, when Sheriff Stone took office, the population of Pickens County was 40,000, and now we're over 125,000. So are we adequately taking care of mental health in this county? Absolutely not. I don't believe we are. Is that our problem? Probably not. It is the state's office. But saying that, and I don't believe you can grow that office to be efficient enough to take care of 3 counties of this size. I just don't. Unfortunately, COVID slowed all those talks down and nothing happened at that level. I think cutting mental health because it is a state function, which is an argument we've had over the years, I don't think is necessarily fair to the residents. I do think the state should fund it more, but I also think they should give us 100% of local government funds. So, that's an argument we can argue till we're blue in the face. But to say behavioral health is going to address the mental health issue is grossly inaccurate. Behavioral health plays a huge function in this county as well. They are 2 separate entities that focus on 2 separate things. They work together because a lot of time you have behavioral health issues. You have your addictions and your other behavioral health issues. That's just one that comes to mind. They go hand in hand with mental health, so there's a lot of crossover. But to say one can replace the other is grossly inaccurate. So I think you have to be very careful there. I think it's 2 separate subjects. So to say you're going to cut 20,000 from mental health and focus on behavioral health, you actually will put behavioral health further in the hole. I think if you're going to do anything, you continue the 20,000, but we're going to help behavioral health too. Now, coming up with the funding for that is going to be unique. But to say this is a state issue, that's not helping the citizens of Pickens County. That's just my opinion, and that's something I'm passionate about because I see it day in and day out. Yes, sir.
As a counselor in my group home for abused children, I've seen the worst case scenario in mental health for sure. As far as what affects the youth, there's never going to be enough money for that, and there's never going to be enough money for it because folks kind of misunderstand that mental health is a health issue. Whether it be people's personality types, all those things that come through. It's always going to be underfunded because they're not like the library. They don't have an active and loud constituent group that can't be undermined by saying, well, that guy's crazy. They're always going to have a problem. The behavioral health piece of it, where people are making choices that lead them in this direction, that could be based on health issues or genetics or the way they were raised or just luck of the draw or whatever. That is certainly a separate element of it that has some effects. And Mr. Sava's point was help those guys be in a better facility, green facility. I think clearly we're going to have more and more issues with that, and as a population, we can't continue to not give people the opportunity to fund themselves. So behavioral health certainly needs some support. I think $20,000 drop in the bucket for the behavioral mental health issues. And again, I don't have an answer for the state level piece of it. I can just tell you, without a shadow of a doubt, there's an army of folks out there that don't see the world through the same sort of logical vision that we have. They commit crimes, they do a lot of things that children get left behind when they go through stupid stuff. There's an army of these folks out there that need help. And your point is valid, that we need to fix that element of it. It has to start with the legislature, so his point is valid. The behavioral health piece of it is critically important. Anything we can do for those guys, structurally speaking, is important. Because that will be full of people that don't see the world the same way we do, they're difficult to communicate with, they're difficult to outreach to. If they come in for help, it's either through law enforcement or it's through direct intervention with folks that love them or should love them, or hopefully love them. It's a difficult thing to charge. For $20,000, I don't know what we get for $20,000. So the behavioral health piece that he's talking about, I'm all for. $20,000, what's fine? I don't understand.
I don't know where it's
It's a
specifically
portion,
going.
so it was set up like Tri-County, unfortunately, because the delegation did it, I guess in the 70s, home rule. but it's a portion of a position, by what I understand. Now, whether or not they use it for position, or whether they use it for telepsych, or whether they use it, I don't remember, to be honest with you, because it's been about a year. Oh, the Department of Mental Health. The Pickens, Anderson, they're on Main Street, they're in Easley, the old Kearns building is where they are in Pickens County. It's been a year since we've had any conversation, so I really, well, 6 months. So I really don't remember what that 20,000 was for, but it was for direct patient services, I do know that.
Yeah, they invoice us, Anderson and Oconee, every year. In the years that it's in the budget, we're able to pay that invoice. In the years that we're not, we don't pay it. They still provide the service, they still run the office there.
What's the service,
Well, they're dealing directly with folks with mental illness that can't necessarily get the care they need in the private sector.
It's for, no,
They will remain it to the state?
it's the ones that they don't, it's to help, so they can bill insurance, they can bill Medicaid, they can bill those things, but the ones that they don't, that don't have coverage, or Medicaid, let's be honest, Medicaid pays pennies on the dollar for any medical bill of any sort. They're, again, they're a state entity. It's actually worse than that. It's actual federal, if you get down to the brass tacks of it. But it's to help offset those costs. That is what that money goes to. And it is direct, whether, like I say, it be a psychiatrist or a counselor or whomever, social worker, not counselor. Whatever, it is direct patient services is what that's intended for.
Mr. Chairman, I know that we are at the top of the list for suicides in the state. I know that we have a high population of ACEs kids. Those are kids that are mentally, physically, sexually, emotionally abused. And there's lots of research that's been done on how that has not only direct impact of the age that you are, but it also future impacts, and it's a never-ending cycle. I don't think we should cut anything from any of these services. We've got a lot of people in this community who need this help, and I've been on a tour, I've sat down with the board, and they can use every penny and then some.
My whole point is that I think what we should do is focus on, this is something, sometimes we fund and sometimes we don't fund it. I would put it to, I would give the $20,000 to Ken to work with behavioral health services on something that they're doing. They just seem to have such an impact. They will get bigger on their own if they're in a bigger building. I just think it's a much better use of the $20,000. That's all I'm saying.
I do understand that, but I do respectfully disagree. I think it's important. I think they do a lot, but I think it's apples and oranges. While they work together, they're both fruits. They're totally different. And when you see, and I mean, my wife's a school teacher, right? When you hear these young kids, the mental health issues that they're having, I think for me to be able to sit and I'm getting passionate, and I know you can't have a rational conversation with an irrational person. It's my favorite saying, but I'm about to get into my passion. When I can't openly say I'm going to cut $20,000 from something that I know needs $100,000, to your point, because $20,000 is a drop in the bucket. I just can't in good conscience do that. I agree, behavioral health needs it too. I really do. And I see exactly what you're saying. But I don't see cutting the $20,000 from mental health doing anything to help behavioral health. I just don't.
Well, give them the $20,000.
Councilman Waters.
We have, I'm not, first off, pretending I know anything about this issue. Y'all have dealt with it, y'all understand the differences between one and the other, and I rely on y'all's expertise in that, and not trying to say one is better than the other. I honestly don't know. My big stickler to this thing has always been that mental health is a state agency, and we're literally giving money to a state agency whose job is supposed to be funded by the state. And unfortunately, they're not doing their job. And the problem is that they don't have to sit in front of people like we do that can sit there and complain about it, you know? And my point to the past has always been to put pressure on them to fund this like it should be funded, and they've refused to do it, and we're left holding the bag. I don't know enough about the issue. I'm not gonna vote in favor of the amendment, not because I'm against it, but because in this particular case, I'm gonna rely on Mr. Bowers understanding of this more than myself. I don't agree with it. I don't agree with the $20,000 for a state agency. It just crawls up my, as much as we have to deal with that, but that's where I am on it.
Councilman Whitehurst, I agree with you 100%. I wish that we could do more with I think we've got to try to figure out how we expand on the communication that we have with our state delegation and to put pressure on that, maybe even through the SCAC. I think we do need to work on that. However, what I'm going to say is, I don't think we need to punish the people who live here as a way to get the state to do something. We've got kids that are killing themselves. We've got people that are using drugs. We've got serious problems throughout this county. We've got a lot of broken homes. And I see this every day through my church. I mean, I can tell you all kind of just unbelievable stories. And I don't see us, our job to me is how can we help the people who live here?
And behavioral health services doesn't deal with any of those kids?
No,
They
behavioral
do.
health
The
is
school system is dealing with them all the
That's what I
time.
just said, is there's a lot of crossover. But
So-
behavioral
so my-
health
my
versus
basic-
mental
my
health
ba-
is totally different.
But it's a lot of crossover, because we have a lot, behavioral health services worked with the school district for a long time.
So
My
does mental
point
health.
is,
So does mental health
I'd
services.
rather give the 20,000 to them, because I can see more of an impact than what they're doing.
That wasn't your motion. Your motion was to cut it, put it in the general fund.
Yeah, with the idea that hopefully Ken will work with the behavioral health services to help them find a new home. That's the goal. It should be a bigger picture, not just handing somebody 20 grand. We got a bigger problem. The solution is not through the state agency, it's through behavioral health services, I think. That's my whole point. So this is just a piece of my bigger picture, which is, let me finish, bigger picture, which is to take this $20,000, put it in the general fund. He goes and sits down with the state and the school district and the city of Pickens, which is trying to find them a new home. Once they find a new home, they're gonna have a much bigger impact on all of this. That's my plan overall. That's just one little piece of it.
Councilman Wilson.
I understand. It's, behavioral health guys don't choose their behaviors, is where it comes down. There's a defined line there. Once you're addicted, you don't choose it as schizophrenia. They don't choose bipolar disorder. But both of those, the schizophrenia and bipolar disorder, a lot of folks end up drug addicted. A lot of folks, bipolar folks end up in prostitution to feed the drug addiction. Lots of schizophrenic folks will become violent. One of them is something that you had no choice in. You have to choose how you're going to deal with it, and you need support. And I'm drawing a big line here, and I know there's a touch crossover. On the behavioral health side of it, we do have some impact in our community directly through that program. Immeasurable. But the actual sitting down with someone and getting a prescription for Tocomax or lithium or whatnot, where else would you go? If you fall in the donut hole, you don't have any sort of support.
So, and I guess that's actually, you made the good point to differentiate the two, and my sister will probably hang me for saying this, but it's okay. I do have a family member that has used behavioral health services, and it wasn't my sister, but uses behavioral health services, and they have played a vital role in this individual's life. They're not addicted to anything. They have behavioral health issues, but they're not addicted to anything. He has a private psychologist that he sees for his mental health issues, but he's lucky enough to not only have insurance, but find the availability with a private provider that can provide those services. Our state mental health system addresses those particular, and there's other things, but addresses those particularly with mental health issues that need that psychiatrist, psychologist services, because behavioral health does not provide those. They're two totally different things in that aspect, and that's the easiest way to break it down. Think emotional, behavior, whatever, that is behavioral health services. And they work with us on the COPE program, and they've done wonderful things there, and they will continue to, and they need to be expanded, and they need to grow, and they need to outreach. But you can't say that just because, and I agree that it's a state agency, but you can't say, well, they're not going to do it, we're not going to do it either, because what's going to happen is our jail's going to be clogged. Behavioral health services can't do their job if you're not addressing the mental health issues. They will tell you if you talk to them, they work hand in hand. There's a lot of crossover where we do this portion, they do this portion, and this is the holistic approach. So I just really feel like that 20,000 needs to be there for that reason. Now I would have no problem if you said, I want to take 20,000 from the general fund and put towards behavioral health services a new home, I would go for that all day long. But to say I want to cut mental health services and take that 20,000 out of the general fund, that's where you lost me. I want to make that clear. That's really where I'm at. I just don't think you can cut one, because you're actually hurting behavioral health by hurting mental health.
Going back to what we talked about earlier, there's no organized grassroots group out there that's been working here. And, you know, gin up and attack ads and whatnot over whether or not we fund people to get them mental health. There's just no group that's going to do that. The constituent groups that could come in here and give us a valid argument about how the impact has been on their lives and things like the library did, those folks get discounted. And what you just said, until you medicate about one person, until you put a wedge of reality in here to open that door, they do not see the world the same way you do. They think they're the king of Europe, or they think that they can spend all the money, if they have checks, they can spend the money. You have to medicate before you can sit down from a behavioral perspective and give these people the tools they need to recognize that they need the medication, that they need the counseling, that they need support groups, that they need a good place to be away from other folks. If they work together, exactly what you said, I think that for me, the motion would be, I like the idea of helping behavioral health guys. So to me, the motion would be pay the $20,000, ask for a specific impact statement, and we're going to do that in fall or late winter next year, January, whatever time period it is, so that we don't do it again next year if we're not getting $1 million on impact. And then again, pursue the thing with behavioral health. You just said we've got to have plenty of room. I mean, how about the third floor of the library? There's plenty of room around the county where these guys could be at, right? Is that not true? Is there not tons of places?
Well, I mean, I generally, my motion is my motion. I mean, I think the administration can meet with behavioral health services and talk about that. My whole point is what I'm trying to do. This is an issue that's bigger than just putting $20,000 on a line and walking away from it. That's all we're doing here. It's a bigger issue than that. And there's an opportunity with behavioral health services and getting them in a bigger building.
But,
Like I said, the 20,000 is not going to help them.
I think the thing that maybe getting your call gets my call is it's a state agency. And you know, maybe it makes me feel better if we give them their $20,000 and then send a letter to the governor and all of our delegates saying how much that we're disappointed that we have to do their job for them. You know how we've done this before, just to make me feel better sometimes.
Yeah,
And it just puts a little bit back there that we're actually doing the state's job once again. And I understand we have to do it because it's gotta get paid from somewhere. But boy, it would make me feel better to say something to the governor and say, you know what? Why don't y'all try to address this and fund your own agencies instead of having them come crawling to us begging for nickels and dimes so they can do their job?
so the thing that makes me feel better about myself is I tell myself they gave me an old car with an 8-track and I just upgraded the radio to a Bluetooth. You know, it's the way I look at it because it's their car, not mine, right? They just let me drive it from time to time. And I know that's a horrible example, but it's the way I have to think about it to rationalize it in my head a little bit. So I guess, and I may be out of line here, but I want to make a substitutive motion, I guess, that we fund mental health at the $20,000 and take up to $20,000 out of the general fund and have Mr. Roper work with behavioral health services and get the state involved, and let's work on a new location for them. That would actually be my motion.
I'll second that.
Discussion on that.
Throwing a letter into the delegation.
With a letter. I wanted to add that. I meant to, yes. With a letter to the governor and delegation.
Just so Trey will feel better.
Any discussion over that?
I think what Trey just talked about from a accountability perspective, when it goes back to him, I mean, accountability, the sheriff doesn't have to have open meetings about how many animals, right? He comes in with some metrics as to keep doing this. He doesn't have to sit down twice a month in front of a room full of people with direct accountability. And the direct accountability from some of a slideshow that helps open newspapers and whatnot, you know, when he's ginned up. He doesn't have that. Delegation, you need once a year, you sign up 3 weeks in advance, you get to have 5 minutes, and they go, okay, thank you, we'll give you the next. That, they don't have an out-the-back exchange in front of us. They're in Columbia. They're completely unaccountable. That, to me, has always been something that's been difficult to me. And I've been very vocal about it before. It kind of undermines some of our relationships with folks on delegation. Because they feel like they're doing a good job. but clearly not funding the local governments the way they're supposed to. That's a practical thing, right? I've been very vocal about that. I like what you said. If we're gonna have to fund this $20,000, even we should know, we're having to pay this out of your tax dollars locally, when all these other tax dollars that you're paying to the state, where the heck are they going? I think that's appropriate for us to do that every time we have to do it. If you keep doing that, the pressure goes back to the delegation. You know, I don't care what you gotta do when you go to Columbia, help us fix roads, help us with healthcare, help us with basic stuff, right? I don't care about naming another bridge into somebody.
This would be a great thing for a public information officer to do, is to get out and put that information out.
Yes.
Any other
Okay,
discussion?
so I wanted you, so basically your motion is, we're gonna give them $20,000 and ask Mr. Roper to work with, I guess, those players, which would be the school district, the city of Pickens, the state, behavioral health service, help them find a bigger place, and that money would be used to facilitate that. It's not gonna just be spent on their general expenses.
What I was trying to do was take your motion and just put the mental health back in. That's what I was trying
That's
to do
fine.
with my motion.
That's fine. I'll agree with that. That puts us at the table. We'll have to be, and everybody's going to have to be at the table if there's something going to come of this. It makes sense.
And actually, mental health folks wanted to speak to us, ask about coming in the fall and having a conversation with at least some of us, if not all of us.
But I
which
agree
think
with,
would be good
I
too.
agree with them. I don't really even want to go down that road because we're going to just be spending more and more money on the state function, and they're rolling in money at the state level.
And they're gonna keep letting us insulate them, because it's the greatest thing ever.
That's what stuck out of me.
One tweet puts us on the, we're trying to get rid of remote control lawnmowers, and I said we could put, whenever CTT come over, and put some goats out there, and they turn it into this craziness, right? The color tricks and sleight of hand shifts the light over here to somebody that hates children away from somebody that you're trying to buy robotic lawnmowers, man, come on. Why can't we do this? And it shifts the look away from these guys every time, every single time, and they get away with it. And
Well, I will also give you my word that I will continue down my path of attempting to having our three counties split out individually, which I believe will shed a lot of light locally. Because when you lump it under three counties, you lose a lot of accountability, you lose a lot of blame, you lose a lot of everything. Where if the focus was purely on Pickens County, I think we would get more accountability. That's the best way to say it. That's correct. And I think it was started long when there were less than 40,000 people. So you look at it, I think we've outgrown it. So, all right, any other discussion on that motion? All those in favor, please signify by raising your hand. That carries. Thank you. Any other discussion or motions on third reading of the budget?
I've got one that's a small issue, but there's a really bigger issue, and I want to talk about it here. My motion is going to be, I'll just say the motion, then I'll give you the reasoning. There's a bathroom leak at Haygood Mill. Last year, it turned into a problem. It's a mold problem. The estimated cost to fix it is $6,000. My motion is for the county to pay half of the monies or effort to fix that leak. And I would like a second just for discussion, because there's a bigger issue here.
I'll take a second for that.
Okay.
I have a motion and a second.
All right. In 2019, you all know that there was a divorce between the Haygood Mill and the county government in the census. And there was an agreement where Davey Hyatt sat down with the county, he sat down with the Haygood Mill, and there was a MOU agreement that was written. The amount of money, and I'm going to get to the repairs, it's going to get to the amount of money that's given to the Haygood Mill annually was really not clear in the agreement. When I talked to administration and council members, they felt the amount should go down over time. That's what was agreed on. When I talked to Davey, initially he said it would be the same, but then he said no, it would be an appropriation of the council government, which is an agreement. When I talked to members on the Haygood Mill board, some said it went up, some said it would stay constant, some said it would go down. So I gather that it's going to be lower over time, given the people that I've talked to, but I don't really know. I wasn't in the room. I can't argue either way, and I'm not going to argue it. But there was a decrease in the Haygood Mill funding this year, a good amount. And I think it caught a lot of the Haygood Mill Foundation blindsided them. They were not clear it was coming. And my advice going forward is that the three parties sit down and put in writing what they actually agreed to in that room. I'd give them a schedule of what you're going to give them going forward. And nail that down, verbally and then put it in writing, so we're not, nobody's blindsided. And when you read the MOU, there's two things in there. One thing says that the county will do repairs, and another line says that the Haggard Mill will do repairs. It's really ambiguous. So until that new MOU is I can read it to you, Trey. Until that MOU is written and rewritten, there's a $6,000 problem there. I think since it's unclear, I'd like to do the county pay 3 and they pay 3 and get that done with. But then the three parties then sit down and go over that agreement, make sure it's clear. Because I don't want to get stuck in the middle of it, because if somebody asks me, what I say is, I wasn't in the meeting. I don't know what you agreed to. You need to go back to the people that you had the agreement with. Do you agree with that?
It's a good point. My question being to staff, why is there a contradiction in the MOU? And I thought the MOU was very concise about what we had discussed and the way we were going to approach this.
Yeah, I don't have the document in front of me. I do remember that it was changing during that period of time daily. I believe there may have been changes made to it in the hour before it was signed. So I don't.
Didn't we have to approve the MOU before it was signed?
I can't speak to what might have been approved by a previous staff member. I just can't. I know that it went through several changes, as that was a very hotly contested negotiation there at the end. I was involved in parts of it, but I can't speak to the final language and how it's arrived at because I wasn't in the room when it happened. That being said, I will tell you, to Mr. Sada's point, that the chairman and I met with the Haygood Mill Foundation Board early in the budget process and told them this year we were looking at doing what the council, as I understood it, meant to do last year, but for COVID. There was an idea when COVID happened, we just did everything the same, remember last year. Well, the idea then and the direction that we understood as a staff is that we were going to start that cranking down. And so this year we told the foundation that we were going to be looking, instead of 134, to look at 104, which I think is what's recommended in the budget document. So, you know, we have had that face-to-face conversation with them. Is the agreement perfect? No, it's not perfect. But the relationship between us and the Haygood Mill Foundation, particularly on the staff level, day to day, me and their staff, my staff and their staff, we're doing really well right now. And I think they understood, because the chairman and I sat there and told them in a face-to-face meeting that we were going to start that process now that they've had time to raise some money.
That is correct. That conversation was had, and we also told them they could apply for ATAX, they could apply for REC funding, and they could apply for any other funding that's available. They actually brought up an issue, and I'm trying to remember exactly what it was, but it was part of something because there was funding that they wanted, but they didn't realize that they could get, and there was a hurdle that they had in the way that they didn't need to have in the way. We had that conversation as well to open up, not only that was some ag money or something that was out there, that had nothing to do with us at all.
Just this week, they told me they've got a grant to fix a lot of their stormwater issues down there at the creek, their erosion, and to stabilize it and also plant it back with native plants through Natureland Trust. So they're doing this sort of thing and reaching out to us and getting our approval at the appropriate point. I think the relationship's pretty good. Now, you know, would they want more money? Y'all talked about a couple other agencies that want more money just tonight.
It's not really an issue of the money. I mean, it's just an issue of, let's get on the same page that it is going to decline. And here's a schedule we're going to give you that decline. I mean, do you have a problem with that?
I do think, to Councilman Sada's point, I think that's what he's trying to clarify, is he wants it in the MOU, that a schedule for decline to be as part of the document. Vice Chairman Cox.
Because
Vice Chairman, he's been patient.
So there's a couple things here. One is, the intent was originally when we set up the 501c3s that we would work with them, that we would pay for stuff all along the way until they became self-sustaining. The group at Haygood Mill wanted to do this on their own, so they chose to do that. I think if you set aside a specific, here's how much it's going to be going down each year, then you're taking out the fact of, oh, we need $6,000 for a bathroom, we might need some help here. So I'm in agreement with you. If it's a county facility, maybe we need to look at how, we got to make sure that we're propping them up so that they can become self-sustaining. I have a question for Mr. Roper. Does the county go and do work at Haygood Mill and for free and charge them anything for the services that we do out there? I mean,
We have not been doing that since
we haven't
this
been doing
happened.
anything as far as,
No, we've gone and looked when they've asked us about structural problems with buildings, or there was an issue with mold, things
Right.
like that we feel like are capital in nature, like the building's gonna suffer if we don't look at it. We look at that, but in terms of grounds,
okay.
in terms of cleaning,
So they're doing,
we're
they're
not
they're
doing
doing
any
all
of
that.
that.
I do know, I talked to Davey today, and I know that they're getting $100,000. I don't know what it's specific for,
It's
though.
for the doors in the pavilion.
It's okay. So they are getting other funding from other places. My whole point is I think, yes, we should probably help them out, but the idea was that we help out all 3 501c3s. Is to prop them up and nurture them and work with them and disciple them so that they can become self-sustaining. It isn't to go, we're gonna give you 134 this year, and next year it's gonna be 104, the next year it's gonna be 74, the next year it's gonna be 54. Because I think you're opening yourself up for what bad things that happen.
But the problem with that is, since you have,
Councilman Wilson has a question.
Does the county risk assessment officer for the facility?
The newest one who's only been on the job a couple of weeks has not, as far as I know. Previously, the previous risk manager did routinely.
So the reason why I asked that is the recreation folks, they're kind of retiring, that's all we're people, moving the grass and whatnot, and discussion about that. The reason I had a panic attack about it was, county risk assessment guy shows up and says, you're gonna make a change to that light up there, or you can't have that there. And he goes and says, hey, you guys need to take this park out, or you need to place this park, it's dangerous, blah, blah, blah. But the county's not coming and saying, okay, here's 2 guys who want to do that, or it's been a facility or whatnot. So they're raising money to do, you guys call it raising money. They're raising money to replace that light, and raising money to do this, so the county says the guys don't know what they have to do. So it's the county facility, so the county risk assessment guy goes to your mill and says, y'all gotta do something about this bathroom, you have to close it down, you have an occupation, right? We're telling them what they gotta do. At our facility, on placing the own, but then it's hands-on, you're gonna give it to them until we get it done. Is that how it should, it's supposed to be done?
Yeah, I'm agree
But
with
that's
you.
the way the folks at the record there go on it. They're like, you're gonna tell me I can't operate the bathroom if I don't place that light, or you're not giving me any support or help or any kind of argument. No, that sounds to me like that's the approach that we have everywhere, when it's fair, but if it's not the case, we have everywhere, we can handle an approach to it. This is what we're gonna talk about, right? Can that guy not have a work order to someone within the county, calls them and says, hey,
Well, then where's that money coming from?
Right.
That's going to be the next argument, which is, I think, what Councilman Seda is trying to get to. But it's also what Councilman Costner is saying is, if we don't fix these problems, then it's going to be an empty facility because they can't do anything with it because they can't afford to do anything with it. So it's a very complicated, sticky. Councilman Whitehurst.
If y'all remember the fiasco we went through with Haygood Mill, we had our staff in there, it was a county facility. And the county ran it, and the county, did like we do the museum, we have county employees in there. And there was a big stink because they didn't think that I think we were gonna fire somebody because they weren't doing their jobs. I remember that's where it all came from. County was making decisions on things to work out there, and then they got all in an uproar and said, we don't want y'all to do anything. We can run it, we can make more money at it, we can make this thing profitable, we can do this and get the heck out of our hair.
They did say that.
And that's putting it mildly, because it was quite, and so our response was, fine, go ahead and do it. And now we're looking 2 years later, well, we got a bathroom leak, we have a mold problem, we want you to pay for part of it.
that's not the reasoning. I'll get into that. I want to get that in a minute, but let me just address Mr. Costner's point, then I'll get to your repair point. You made an agreement with them, okay? You deal with it as you please. What I would do is put them on a schedule, because that was generally what was agreed on. Without the schedule, it becomes political every year. They bring 100 people here next year and tell them you're cutting the mill, you're gonna look foolish. What I would do is put them on a schedule and say, we agreed to it, no tears. That's how I would handle this if I was you, but you guys deal with it the way you want.
But
I-
no,
I-
it's not do it the way you
It's-
want. We're a council.
But what I'm, no.
Yeah, we voted as a group, so
No,
you can,
I didn't vote for
I'm saying for
the
this-
council voted as a
From
group.
No,
this
my point
moment
is- no,
forward,
what's gonna-
we will do it as a council.
But what I'm
and
gonna,
you're a part of
because
that.
there's no schedule,
Right.
I'm
if
gonna
we-
argue every year they get more money.
If we have a schedule.
And they're gonna bring people here who are gonna argue for more money. You have an opportunity now to avoid all that political infighting, because you have a verbal agreement. Put it in a schedule, and then you could say, all right, you're going from 134,000 to zero over 5 years, and when you go to zero, no complaints. Look, your person signed on the dotted line. What you open up now is these people coming back every year and saying you're cutting the hay good enough. You deal with, you're the leadership. You guys could deal with it the way you'd like. That's how I would deal with it.
So you're advocating,
Vice Chairman.
I'm sorry.
First and foremost, we are a council. 4 out of 6 decide what we do.
The leadership would meet in this, and
And
carve out
whatever
this
is
agreement.
decided would be brought back, and this council would decide 4 out of 6 on how we went forward. That's the way it's done. That's the way we would do this. And I have no problem doing that. So, but you can't say you decide, it's we decide.
I
And the
disagree.
majority wins.
I disagree, because whether or not you're gonna sit down with them and have an MOU is gonna be up to you. You're the leader. He's gonna make that meeting. It's not gonna be me. It's gonna be you.
But you will help decide the schedule.
I will vote for the schedule against. I'm just saying, as the leadership who is part of this thing, this is how I would handle it. Because you're inviting a political fight every year.
And as the leadership it is in your district, I would make sure that you had every opportunity to attend, because it does sit in your district.
Okay.
As the leadership.
But I
that's
wasn't
way
in the
would handle
room.
that.
I have no idea what you agreed to.
There's a lot of things that I have to talk about every year that I had no
Gotcha. Okay.
dealing with getting it started.
All right.
That's just part of joining a council, you know, or joining a group. I know exactly, I get it, but I want to say, we can't just linger on the past. We all going to decide going forward. That's just the way it's going to work.
My understanding, I thought there was a set plan for this thing, and I thought we had a very specific setup.
Was it just verbal? That's what I'm getting at too.
Yeah, why did we, because it seems to be, because it seemed we went through a lot of minutia, and then when you're saying that the thing was changing at the end, I'm kind of confused.
Yeah.
The verbiage is, they'll be paid $134,000 at the start. That's it. That's it. There's no timeline
And
or
then there would be a reduction every year.
Well, it doesn't say that.
It doesn't say that.
That was your understanding, but when you talk to,
It's subject to appropriation by county council or something like that. There's language in it that talks about an annual budget. But I don't, like I said, it was changing all the time.
it's the best solution.
So the actual motion on the table.
Oh, let me get back to, let me explain that. Okay, so
The actual
this is
motion
what
on the
this is what the MOU says.
Gentlemen.
It says county responsibility, repair damage to premises not caused by the foundation or visitors. So I would argue that a leak is not something caused by the foundation or visitors, therefore the county is required to fix it. However, down here it says the foundation is responsible for all costs and maintenance and repairs. So it's contradictory.
How did they get a leak to go to $6,000?
I don't know. I don't know. But my point is, when you read this, repair damage to premises not caused by the foundation. Well, I don't think a leak is caused by the foundation. I think that is a structural failure. If I was a landlord and something leaked, I would pay for it. It was a structural failure.
And if we don't, then it's going to continue to do damage to the structure in which we own, so.
And they're willing to pay for half of it. Like I said, I think if we give this administrative discretion to go down there and do 50-50, maybe your guys just do the work and they pay for the supplies, whatever. But we'll leave that to you. But then going forward, say the repair should be done by the Haggard Mill Foundation, or it should be done by the county, just make it clear.
I think you're right, we need to agree on this, because apparently it was clear as mud, which it wasn't in my mind when you did it. And we are kind of stuck in a spot now where we're looking at, we said one thing and the document contradicts itself, which to me is appalling.
To my recollection, I do remember we put some verbiage in there to protect ourselves and our property Some of that being that they can't change things without approval, because, I mean, we don't want them going to do something crazy, and I think as part of that compromise, was where okay, you gotta pay for things that are just normal wear and tear that we didn't do. I think that was part of that compromise, because I do remember that conversation.
Mr. Chairman,
Vice Chairman.
Mr. Roper, can I request that all council be given a copy of this MOU, of the existing MOU that was signed on, when everybody walked out to the mill with Mr. Wilson and Davey Hyatt and everybody?
It included the golf cart, if I'm not mistaken.
Yeah, I think it did. And then I would like to make a recommendation that we put this in the committee of the whole, unless you want to make a motion to, I like the idea of going, guys, we're going to disciple, we're going to work with you. If you want to go down the structured approach, I'll go with you on that. I just don't know which way, I don't know how to make the motion.
What it does is it just, it takes the politics out of it. There was an agreement. And when you have a clear structure, I don't have a problem sitting there saying, you guys agreed to this. You need to stick to it. Leave them alone. I don't have a problem saying that. You know, you signed on the dotted line. But now it's just kind of unclear what was agreed to.
Well, I will say this, the hostility behind that agreement up to the last moment, and there was a lot of hostility around that agreement. Part of it was just getting an agreement. I do know that, and trying to find a compromise to keep things going forward was part of that. I think that when we go to approach this agreement again, you and I are going to learn that there are going to be people that are all for it, and there are going to be people that are totally against it, and that's the political game that goes with it. You just have to be prepared for that, which I very much am, just like anything else would do. But there was a lot, hostility may not even be the right word.
Understand, yeah.
So, saying that. Any other discussion on fixing 50%, fixing this bathroom issue at the Hagood Mill?
And just give me the assurance that you're going to meet with them on December.
I like what Mr. Constantine had said, to put it in the committee so we can, that way it ties us to actually doing it and getting it adjusted. Is that something?
Okay, so I'll make a substitute motion that it just goes to committee and we'll go from there. I mean, I'd like to try to get this problem fixed.
We've got to fix the problem.
Okay.
As in addition to that, I think we have to fix the
Okay.
problem. We're in a bad situation.
Okay, so my substitute motion is to pay for half of the fix on that bathroom, whether it is providing work or providing effort. That's up to the administration to work out, and then the issue of the MOU will be sent to committee.
And that'll come out of the general fund.
Yeah.
I'll second your substitute motion.
Thank you.
Any other discussion? All those in favor, please signify by raising your hand.
I appreciate that, thank you.
Any other discussion or motion for the third reading of the budget?
So that goes to committee. It goes to committee for us to figure out what we do, what holes we need.
It pays for the half of it with however they're going to do it, but then goes to committee, just that portion of it.
The MOU goes to committee.
Opens the door for us to get sorts of memorandum of understanding. Is that a contract for a period of time?
It's for the most part, it's written. It's just, and it's not a bad agreement. There's just two places in there that I think you just need to go through, and you can write an amendment to it, and then just get them to sign it, and you'll be good.
And they don't sign it, what we do.
I think they will, because they've asked for it. I think they've generally agreed to this idea of lower funding. They want to see it in writing. And my personal feeling is, I just don't want the politics that could happen.
They can plan around it.
Like happened a couple of years ago.
Yeah, well, they'll come and say, hey, you're cutting a Haygood Mill, and they run to the press, and in reality, it's what you had a verbal agreement a few years ago, but you don't have it in writing.
Yeah, we've done that once.
Yeah, so.
Anything else, any other discussion over third reading? I know he's got something.
I'd like to talk about the rescue squad. We've already moved the budget out. We talked about an initial issue with the rescue squad. I don't quite understand. I don't guess that's, I'm not thinking that's tied directly to the budget. We can make those changes with all the way after the plan. basically the same for the description now. Budget for dispatch. It's clear she wants to move in this particular direction.
Right.
And we'll take time to plan it, and not like I said.
I think that's a long committee meeting. I think that's what that is. Yes. Anything else related to the third reading of the budget tonight?
Can we clarify that the two other guys, this is part of the
That was done at the last meeting. We've added
Those
that.
numbers are in there. Yeah.
And Mr. Greeno tipped his hat to their vehicles will be coming out of that additional state aid. So, any other discussion there? All right, hearing no other discussion on third reading of the budget, all those in favor, please signify by raising your hand. That carries. Any other motions tonight? I have a motion to dismiss, and I have a second. All those in favor? We stand adjourned. Thank you, gentlemen.
Thank you.
See the contradiction in it?